Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Ken Reads. And today we are taking a letter from one of my followers, Matilda, who wants to share their experience of being blindsided in what seemed like an otherwise great relationship. And before I get into Matilda's letter, I just wanted to remind everyone that, firstly, thank you for all the interest you've shared in Ken Reads. Also, I know a few of you have mentioned to me that you prefer the live format to hearing it on Spotify when I do that separately. Good feedback for me for how I might do things going into October. And if you are interested in submitting a letter to me, just as a reminder, the submissions will be open mid-October, where I'll take on 12 for the month and then go to read them throughout November. And I'll let everyone know when that's going up and we'll take things from there. But without further ado, let's get into Matilda's letter and see what she has shared with us today. All right. Matilda writes, "My ex and I met online and had a great relationship from the beginning. We had a ton in common and were so similar, though just different enough that it was still interesting. We had the same goals and visions for the future regarding marriage, kids, where we wanted to live, etc. We had a lot of fun together, and the chemistry, both physical and emotional, was clearly there. There were many nights hysterically laughing on the couch throughout our entire relationship. We saw each other several times a week. I was wary of love bombing and am a self-identified anxious attacher who's done a lot of personal work to become more secure. So I didn't want to rush into anything and wanted to take my time truly getting to know each other, which he, at the time, was very respectful of. 2 months into the relationship, I asked him how he felt about being boyfriend-girlfriend. I was ready to put a label on it and take it to the next level. He was very clearly into me and very consistent in his behaviours. When I asked, he got uncomfortable and said, "I don't really like labels. It takes so long to get to know someone." Now, I was shocked given how he'd acted so into me prior to this. I said I didn't want to pressure him, and this is where I just stood at the time being, and it was expressive how I was feeling. He then said he'd been wondering about what to call me too. He said, "Yes, let's do it. I do like you and where this is going." We spent the next few months very happy and growing closer. Again, no love bombing. Everything felt like it progressed very naturally and at a healthy pace. We spent the holidays together and began meeting each other's meeting each other's friends and families. Everyone got along great. It was a perfect fit. We are both introverts too. Fellow introverts. So throughout our relationship, we also made sure to have our own time. We made each other a priority, but we also had a good balance of encouraging each other to make sure we spent time with friends, having solo time to read, rest, recharge, etc. We planned weekend getaways and talked a few months about our future, and we often made comments of, if we move in together, we'll have to figure out how to make room for all of our books and how to make sure the cat and dog get along. Unfortunately, he and I started having respective health problems. Long story short, I had a slew of things that started happening and didn't know what was causing it. He told me he wasn't going anywhere. He wanted me to lean on him and be my first call whenever something happened. I was worried it would be too much, but he said it didn't bother him and he just wanted me to be okay. He was super vulnerable and open to me about stuff he'd been through that was similar. It was nice to feel so emotionally close to him. He was so incredibly supportive over the next few months, and one night he held me in his arms as I sobbed hysterically after a trip to the emergency room, and I knew I was in love. My nervous system truly felt calm whenever I was around him, and I never felt more loved or safe, and I'm very open with my emotions, and he always said it was one of his favourite things about me. He had an addictive personality. He had a history of abusing alcohol, though currently was not drinking. He was a heavy marijuana user and had health problems related to this. I knew he smoked weed, but didn't know just how much until he got violently ill one weekend together. And when we got back home, he barely spoke to me for the rest of the week. Now we're starting to see some glaring stuff come out. I knew he was really sick, but didn't fully understand what was going on. Later that week, he apologized for keeping me at arm's length, and we had a long discussion. He truly had been so sick he barely got off the couch. I could tell he lost like 20 pounds within a week, and when I did see him a few days later. He felt embarrassed and had a pity party for himself, But he wanted to let me in and fully explain his history because he wanted a future together and wanted to show up for me in a way that I deserved. I told him I'm happy to support him, but also didn't want him to necessarily do this again, and I also wanted to be there for him. I didn't want him to resent me or feel like he had to change. He ended up getting sober and had some initial withdrawal symptoms, but I was always patient, kind, and supportive, and he always said how appreciative he was to have someone in his corner. I was so proud of him. Okay, so I'm going to take a little pause here. This is very interesting because it seems like up until the obvious drug stuff started to come out of the woodworks, everything seems like it's been going pretty hunky-dory for Matilda. Like it seems like, everything on paper is going pretty well. But it is interesting how there, that whole paragraph detailing these addiction issues. I'm actually kind of surprised there wasn't mention of this earlier. And it makes me wonder, I wonder if this was something that Matilda would have known was something that was gradually, she was made aware of over time, if it was something that he had disclosed, that he had a history of abusing alcohol in the past as well too. But yeah, that sort of addiction history, bit of a major red flag for me at least. And it is interesting to hear how he was managing a lot of stuff with weed as well too. And then when he got ill and lost about 20 pounds, he also just backtracked from you completely without really explaining what was going on. So strange stuff happening there. Anyways, despite all of that, their health stuff brought us closer together. Everything was going great. He began saying things like, "You mean everything to me, and you're my favorite person. I've never said that about anyone except my grandmother who passed away." He even started calling himself my dog's stepdad. On Valentine's Day, he told me he was excited for many more Valentine's Days together. He would text me every morning and call me every single night that we weren't together, and we'd talk on the phone for an hour or two. He ended up having some work stress happen and then got kicked out of his house unexpectedly and went through some tough times with his family. I helped him move and look for a new job. He was pretty open with me about how he was feeling about all of it and said how much he appreciated having me on his team. With my health stuff going on and me relying on him, it was nice to be able to support him and be his rock through hard times too. Yeah. This is interesting that both of you respectively were going through some pretty significant health and emotional stuff respectively. So I could imagine that when Matilda, you were going through your health stuff, he definitely was someone great to turn to during this time, and vice versa when he was going through his stuff with family and also health. And I have to say, if I were in your shoes, I wouldn't have necessarily seen anything, glaringly alarming at this particular point in time. So I'm kind of interested now as the reader to find out where this all goes pear-shaped. So he ended up having some work stress happen and then got kicked out of his house. Oh wait, have I read that? Sorry, yeah. Now at this, oh God, okay. This is something that's quite significant. At this point, we still hadn't said, "I love you" yet. Okay. I'm glad to know this now. I was in love, but I was his first actual girlfriend. We're in our early 30s and he is shy, so I didn't want to push him or say it too early. I could feel it in his actions and how he was showing up for me, so I didn't question it. I knew he'd say it when he was ready. I'd never felt so loved before. Okay, I'm going to take a pause here to say, alongside what happened earlier where he was unsure if he wanted to be in a relationship, to me, I understand that, there's a lot of thirsts going on here, but even in saying that, I think it's okay to feel like you can express yourself in a relationship. And I'm almost wondering, on one hand, what was going on for you, Matilda, that made you feel maybe a bit reluctant to express "I love you" in that situation as well too? Because on one hand, totally get it that if this was something where, there was a lot of thirst for each of you, there may have been some resistance. But also at the same time, I wonder if he was someone where, due to his behavior and the way he was recovering from his health stuff, his work stress, that perhaps there was a fear that if I were to say "I love you," he might run away and not want to interact with you. Because sometimes I find with avoidant attachers, it can feel like if you were to express your feelings, that they will just bolt and run. And sometimes that fear can also be something we've had growing up, from past experiences of childhood where, God forbid, we ever expressed ourselves, we were made to feel like we were about to be abandoned by people closest to us or shamed for even expressing ourselves. So, yeah, this is I'm starting to see some very visible stuff emerging for where this could all go to, downhill. So, Matilda continues, he was always so tender and gentle with me, and I knew he deeply, deeply cared about me. My friends all said he was in love with me too, based on the things he said and how he showed up for me. Yeah, I actually would agree with this. They could see it in how he acted around me. His friends and family would make comments about how pretty and lovely I was, and that they totally understood why we were together. He would always respond with, I know, she's beautiful and I'm very lucky to be with her. Now, he's a very independent person who's quite comfortable being alone. So I know that letting me into his space and spending so much time with me was because he truly enjoyed being with me. He always said that nobody had ever treated him this well or made him feel this happy. Well, that's a very avoidant thing to say. He expressed how much he felt like he could be his true self around me. So if this is his first time being with someone like you, then one thing that's coming to my mind is I wonder if this was also maybe his first experience with a fear of intimacy, because there's a lot of stuff going on here which is quite distinctive compared to some other letters that I've read out, where there's minor resistance to labeling everything between the two of you. You both have actually collectively come together over respective health crises, and in a previous letter I read out where someone was going through quite a significant health issue, their partner just turned away and couldn't handle it. So to me already, even though this guy has had a history of, addiction and also, gone through a lot of stuff, I got to give this guy credit where it's due. He's obviously done work on himself to overcome his addiction-related stuff. You also, I think, have done a great job of facilitating a relationship with him and also taking things slowly but surely. You've assessed the fact that you don't feel love-bombed. I mean, if there's one thing that I'm sensing from this is that whilst there may be an absence of emotional communication, particularly from his side about how he's feeling, it doesn't mean to say that he'd never loved you. I think he absolutely does. But I think one thing that I'm noticing is this isn't feeling at the moment as severe as some other avoidant cases that I've read out before too, which is not to say that it won't be by the time I'm done with this letter, but it is interesting just how things have moved fairly smoothly compared to other cases that I've read out. And this is just, again, another great example of how, big this spectrum of insecure attachment can actually be. But I'm now really intrigued to sort of find out when, probably, as I suspect will probably happen, the shutdown and also the ending for this otherwise seemingly great relationship, occurs. So I almost don't want it to go badly because everything up until this point's reading really, really good. So I'm kind of like, oh God, please neither of you go, down a dark path. All right, so after 7 months of dating, I took a cute selfie with his cat and he made it his screensaver on his phone, saying he wanted to be able to always look at his two favorite things. Whoa. A few days later, I asked him to do something and he did it, but not fully. I asked him if he could finish doing the rest and I could tell he got irritated. I told him it meant a lot for me if he would do it. He said, "You're welcome," and it seemed like everything was fine. We went out of town for my birthday the following week, and I could tell he was distant. Here we go. I don't know why. At some point during the trip, I expressed wanting to increase our physical intimacy and felt a little frustrated sometimes because I felt like I initiated a lot. And it just felt like, it was something that he didn't reciprocate nearly as much as I wanted it from my end. Now, in saying that, he did a lot for me in every other way, and I told him that. We talked about it and he agreed, but I could feel him sort of tense up. We also had a disagreement the next day about something else. It wasn't a fight, but he was wanting to do something I felt was unsafe and he disagreed. Now I said, okay, do what you think is best. I'm not going to stop you. I still want to know how things are going, even if I don't agree. I don't want you to feel like you can't talk to me about anything. He seemed okay with it, but I could tell there was some distance. On our way home, I asked him how he felt about us lately and thought it was good to check in from time to time. Yeah, I agree. Great move on you, Matilda. He said he was happy with where things were at and he felt like things were easy between us. I asked if there was anything I did that he really liked or anything he didn't like that I could do differently, and he said no. Well, that's a little bit strange considering the fact that he'd already seemingly expressed some frustration a bit passive-aggressively towards you. So, yeah, this is starting to sound to me like fear of conflict, not wanting to be open and honest about how he's truly feeling, as well as not really, I think being as close as he once was. And it's interesting how going on a trip seems to have elicited this passive aggressiveness. So, yeah, starting to sound like it's very much a him problem. But let's continue. When we got back, he paid for almost all of the trip. We were going to split it, but he asked me to send in my half too. I had a birthday party with friends the following weekend, and he paid for everything then too. And he was lovely to everyone. He got me flowers and told me how lucky he was to have me and how very special I was. I knew he meant it, but I could also tell something was off. I was starting to feel disconnected from him and knew we needed to talk. He just started getting quieter and the conversation felt stunted when we saw each other a few times a week beyond the usual, "How was your day?" Oh dear. Can I just say that I think that feeling of being disconnected from someone who is avoidantly attached is a very palpable thing. I know for me, I always feel it in my gut. It's just this sort of instinctual thing of like, there's something not quite right here, even if it all looks good on paper. It's not a fun feeling at all. 4 days later, right as we hit the 8 months mark of being together, he came over to hang out and abruptly discarded me. Oh, Jesus. He said he just didn't see us taking this to the next step and getting serious or moving in together. He said he didn't feel the way he used to. He started to feel resentful, but said he knew he shouldn't feel that way, and certain personality quirks started to bother him that never did before. He said his normal MO is to just push people away and to act like a dick, and said he didn't want to do that to me. He said he almost texted me to end it, and it took him a lot for him to show up and tell me in person. He said he really wants to be friends, and we're both at the age where he doesn't want to continue on if he doesn't see a future. I asked him what changed, and he just said, "It's out of your control, and I'm not going to change my mind." He brought a bunch of my stuff to give back. It felt like a huge slap in the face, like he was just so done and completely unwilling to talk about it. He was ice cold and had a dead look in his eyes. I had no idea who this man was in front of me. During the discard, I was very calm, likely from the shock. I said that I can't want someone who doesn't want me, and I'm not going to beg. Good on you. I told him I'd have to remove him from all social media because it would hurt too much to see him and his cat, who had also become very attached to. He went back home to get a few more of my things, and when he came back, I hugged him goodbye and started crying. As he held me in his arms, I felt him start to shake, and I looked up at him and he was tearing up, and then he left. Wow. I was in love with him and hadn't told him yet because I was waiting for him to say it first. Next time, say it. Just being gentle, next time, don't hold back. Because I can tell how much you both really cared about each other. And this letter is a testimony to the amount of love you've had. I can see someone here says, fearful, avoidant, dismissive, leaning. I would completely agree. This isn't sounding to me like a traditional dismissive avoidant. Particularly with the history of big addiction sort of stuff, I would completely agree. I ended up texting him the next day that I loved him. Good on you. I needed time to heal and asked for no contact for a while. I told him I'd let him know if and when I wanted to be friends and that I was always want the best for him. I knew I'd regret never telling him, and I expressed that. I knew it wouldn't change anything, but I had to be honest about how I felt. He replied that he cared deeply about me and always will. He said it was a hard decision and he felt horrible, but felt it was for the best. He said I'm incredible and he really hopes we can be close as friends after the time passes, but that he couldn't in good conscience be with me if he wasn't 100% in it. He said he'll respect my space, but the door to friendship is always open and he wishes me the best in everything. His response felt like a business email or something I'd expect from someone after a few dates, not someone I'd been so emotionally connected to for 8 months. Yeah, isn't that terrible when that happens? I have a few things to say on this, which is to say, one, this has been a little bit different to the letters that I've normally read, where the for want of a better word, the discard, the abrupt ending is marked by a lot of things leading up to it. A lot of passive aggressiveness, stonewalling and pushing the other person away, slow fading, ghosting. I feel as though that even though this guy exited the scene in a very abrupt way, I will give him credit where it's due, which is the fact that if his known disposition is to be an asshole to previous exes on his way out, I will give him credit for his self-awareness and not necessarily doing the full extent of what he's normally done to people, probably just texting them and saying, I'm not into you, goodbye. I will give him credit for actually having, the conversation. But that's where my compliments begin and end. In that I do feel like this guy knows he has a pattern of doing this to people. And even though you may have technically been his first girlfriend, the fact of the matter is he's done this to multiple people. And clearly his stint in recovery from his addiction issues has not dealt with a lot of his own avoidant attachment sort of stuff. And I also think it's so not okay to be offering you, friendship off the back of what has been a very romantic episode together. This honestly didn't read like 8 months. It read like 8 years. There's just so much going on here in this letter. And I feel like this entire experience has completely blindsided you. And it's not something that I've really talked about a lot, but that formal ending of things where he's explaining how you'll always be in my heart and we can be friends forever. And he's not really addressing a lot of those big emotions and even being willing to work it out like it's some sort of business arrangement, I think is so cold and unfair to the extent of what you had together. I mean, it's not like you're in fucking business. You've got a romantic relationship. We're not here to basically act like we're corporate employees who just aren't fitting in with the team culture. It's like, no. You can't just behave that way. It's so jarring and so disrespectful to everything that you've created. Anyways, let's continue with what Matilda has to say. I was and still am shell-shocked, yeah, I bet. We were super compatible and he'd given me nothing but green light after green light. And that was why I felt so incredibly bewildered by all of this. Even my friends and therapists are in utter shock. We've never actually had an actual fight. He'd always pursued me and was so consistent in how he showed up. I never did anything but support him at work, in his health crises, etc. I always encouraged him to spend time with his friends and on his hobbies, and was consistent and loving in how I treated him and always verbalized how much he meant to me. I never felt like I was suffocating him or ever put any demands on him. What makes me angriest is that he made a unilateral decision and never even communicated any concerns to me or gave us a chance to talk things through like you would in a healthy relationship. I agree. And I want to go back to that whole car ride where you're traveling together. It's like, bro, you clearly have something wrong. Just say it and just express what you're feeling. Just because you're feeling like something's not right doesn't mean the relationship isn't right. Not okay that he couldn't even communicate this. He seemed so secure at first, but having learned more about attachment styles off the back of this experience, I truly believe he's a textbook dismissive avoidant based on what I've shared with you and a lot of other things I didn't. I actually go back to what one of the users said here. Dismissive leaning, fearful avoidant, in my opinion. Yes, dismissives can also be addicts, but I find that the fearful avoidance, definitely more in that addict sort of territory. And even though he may be introverted and lean more in the direction of sounding like a stereotypical dismissive, I am thinking there is that fearful element too. So yeah, not great at all. But again, I will say this has been, I'm like I said, I will give this guy credit compared to what a lot of other avoidance I've heard about, in that, it does seem like there is a degree of self-awareness, not enough, unfortunately, to have facilitated a better way out of this. In fact, I think he still has mountains of work to do on himself. Congratulations for his work in addiction recovery, but Jesus, he's got a lot of work to do on his interpersonal skills. Now, there's some questions and comments for me that I just want to share. I just wanted to say thank you for reading my letter and for all your content. It's so healing. You're very welcome. He never said, I love you, but I truly felt in my bones that he did. Ugh, I feel you when you say this. The way he looked at me, the way he showed up for me, through all of his health problems, and the way he let me in during all of this. Words and touch were not his strong suit, but he showed how deeply he cared through his actions. I've heard that a lot of avoidant attachers don't fall in love because they never let that deep connection form. But I do think he loved me and just couldn't allow himself to admit it consciously because it was too scary to admit. Does this seem like an accurate assessment to you, or am I just in delusional land here? Please tell me you agree. No, I think he loved you, but I think that it's one of those things where, let me put it like this. I get a bit frustrated with avoidance when they start saying stuff like, I never really loved that person, or, I never really thought that we were that compatible, as if to say this, rationalization of the past experience, basically ameliorates everything and they've realized, oh yeah, I just wasn't in love. It's like, no. Like, are you talking from genuine fact here? Or are you just creating a narrative in your head to avoid the discomfort of the end of this relationship? I shared this example yesterday that I have met someone who leans fearfully avoidant in my life. They're an acquaintance. And they did say to me on multiple occasions, oh yeah, like I was never in love with that person who I was with for 6 months, as they're crying to me while they talk about it. I'm like, I can tell you now, I ain't ever cried about someone I'm not that into. But if you're going to try and convince yourself you're not into someone where you're tearing this much up, I've got to tell you, there's obviously some emotion there. And I think the thing is that a lot of them pride themselves on never actually allowing themselves to get that close to someone. So here's the rub. I worry sometimes that avoidant attachers who are in their wounding are not the most reliable accounts of their own emotional experience. And that's why I think a lot of the time, many of us often feel like we know them better than they know themselves. So that's why whenever they, even online, they might be like, oh, dismissive avoidance are never really in love because they never allow someone fully in. I think that's partially accurate. I think they do have feelings for you, but I think that they don't allow themselves to be fully involved in the relationship with you because they're so scared of what the consequences might be if they allow themselves to feel that way. So I don't think they're always telling an accurate account of what's going on inside of them. Matilda continues, sometimes I worry his feelings faded after the honeymoon phase and that he took that as a sign we weren't compatible anymore. I wonder if his lack of experience led him to believe it was just gone, rather than a normal part of a relationship and a sign we were deepening our connection. Well, we know for a fact based on him that he's done this sort of thing to people before, so it suggests to me that even if he never had a formal relationship with any of these previous people he'd been with, I wouldn't be surprised if he's no stranger to ending relationships because he has gotten freaked out when people get close to him before. So I suspect it wasn't just the honeymoon ending that happened. I think this has probably happened before. My deepest insecurity is that he ran away because of my health problems. I didn't know what was causing them, but had a plan in place and things were going to get better. So I didn't know why he would have left then, if he stood with me when it was this bad. He always said my health issues didn't bother him, and I was just being proactive, not just sitting around and complaining. My inner critic says I was starting to become too much because I was having health anxiety. Understandable given what I'd been through, but I don't think I was. I think it was just the expectations that had been there for someone long term were starting to weigh on him, and he felt that he couldn't live up to the expectations of being vulnerable, etc., because of how he was probably feeling at the time as our relationship was deepening. Completely agreed. He hasn't mentioned that your health issues are an issue. He hasn't explicitly told you what the problem is. He's just told you abruptly, I just can't do this. Why? Why can't you do this? They're the questions I'd be asking. And also to your inner critic, I understand where your inner critics come from. Hell, I'm sure a lot of people who've had the inner critic that tells them you're too much and you're too needy probably relate. But I'm here to tell you that often we're looking for reasons to best explain often very hard to understand experiences. And it doesn't seem to me like he's given you explicit evidence to say, these health issues are actually getting in the way of my love for you. It actually sounds to me like he was just incredibly anxious to let you in, and that's ultimately what led to him pushing you away, which was so unfair. I'm going to answer one more. During the discard, he acknowledged he usually pushed people away, but forced himself to show up. And the text he sent the next day when he said, it was a tough decision and I feel horrible, but I feel it's for the best. That makes it seem like he really thought about it, but I don't think he really did. Sometimes I think he got triggered with his limbic system fears and they just completely took over him. Other times I think he was self-aware enough that if he insists upon friendship and said he won't change his mind because he knows I deserve better and he won't ever get there. Okay, so I think when it comes to avoidance before they end things, I do think that a lot of them premeditate their exit strategy out of relationships. And this is usually when their anxiety is like hitting 10 out of 10. Some of them have premeditated it for quite a while. Others may come up with an excuse very rapidly because their anxieties overwhelm them. So to think about it, these are people who are like constantly just mentally on the go. I saw a really good video interview today with Thais Gibson and a recovering dismissive avoidant. And the interviewee, the dismissive avoidant attacher, was saying, I found that I've had to meditate quite a lot because my mind is constantly on the go and I can never settle and feel like I'm actually grounded, and I've needed that to actually reconnect with my body and also connect with my feelings. And I thought that was really interesting insight because I thought, wow, it just seems to me like these people are constantly just overthinking a lot of life scenarios and at times can't actually sit with what's going on without thinking about worst case scenarios like, what if it doesn't work? We're not going to make this happen. What if I love someone else? What if I want to go dating again? Could you imagine how exhausting it would be to have a head where you're constantly ruminating that much, like it's OCD on steroids? I can't imagine it would be great. Anyways, I'm going to round it here because I've got to get on with some activities today. But Matilda, thank you for your letter. I'm sure this has been very relatable for a lot of people. And I also want to round out here by saying this, I have to say, was a letter that I actually found quite heartwarming because even though your partner did a lot of dysfunctional stuff, I will say there does feel, even as I was reading it, like there was a lot of very beautiful romantic time shared together, where I do believe there was a lot of love for you in that relationship that unfortunately got overwhelmed by tremendous fear in this experience, which is just terrible. Matilda, thank you very much again. And just as a quick reminder that for those of you who are interested in submitting a letter to me, you're very welcome to do so when I open submissions up again halfway through this month of October. And I'll just take 12 for the month because I got a little bit overwhelmed previously with the 30 plus letters that I got before. But I feel like things are starting to now be a little bit more settled. All right. Thank you, everyone. And I'll be back again very soon.